Welcome to the Multifamily Management Excellence Podcast. Are you interested in learning from multifamily experts and how they achieved success? Then you have come to the right place. Your host, Mike Ballard, interviews industry experts to share their stories and advice to achieving success in the multifamily industry. Our goal is to provide you with resources and tools to increase profitability and achieve success on your own multifamily journey.
Welcome, everybody, to the Multifamily Management Excellent Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ballard from Ascent Multifamily Accounting. Today, our guest is Robby Thomas. He's a partner and principal and VP of Asset Management for Camino Verde Group based in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we're excited to have you here today, Robby. How are you?
I'm great. And so good to be with you this morning, Mike.
Thank you. Nice to be with you. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Today, I'd like you to talk about your career before real estate, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So I spent the majority of my professional life in the banking industry. I started right out of, pretty much as I was going to college. And eventually, I actually dropped out of college and continued into the banking field.
Got it. And what part
What's that?
What part of the country were you in?
Oh yeah, I was in Boston, Massachusetts. So I spent most of my adult life in Boston. Originally, I'm from Trinidad and migrated to go to school and ended up staying in Boston. Loved the city. And went to Northeastern University, studied sociology. And, during my summer, I had an opportunity to work at a bank and eventually stayed because I enjoyed it so much. Eventually went back to school and completed my education. But that journey took me maybe 20 years in the banking industry, 20 plus years. Working for Bank of America, it's now called Santander Bank. Most of those years were spent in the commercial banking side of the business, and had a very interesting opportunity to meet a lot of business owners. And a lot of the really successful business owners were real estate people. And so it always piqued my curiosity. These guys had 15 units and a lot of employees coming to the bank. And so I was always engaging. And I had a really good friend who was a property manager, and he tried to get me into his company. So there was always a very unique piquing interest in the real estate market.
Got it. So then you were also, while you're in the banking interest, didn't you do something in the housing area?
Yeah. So during one of the moments that I stepped away from banking, I always got involved in nonprofit work, and I had an opportunity to get a contract to manage a nonprofit, major nonprofit program that involved homelessness prevention. So that's number one. One of the first instances where I began to see the need for housing and how difficult it was for people that were homeless to become housed. And so there's a very, very sort of in-depth look at how the housing community struggled to meet the needs of low-income, affordable housing for some segments of the community. But I also, became a landlord in that process and began to appreciate how the business began to, how much involved and how involved you really need to be in managing the business, because I didn't handle it the right way initially, and I learned a few lessons in the process.
Were you when you said became a landlord, was that for your private?
This is my own private purchase where, I sitting at my desk. One day I said, at some point I need to find an exit, for what I'm doing today. As much as I enjoyed it, I thought it would make sense to eventually begin to let money work for me instead of me working for the money. And I purchased my first multi or two family. It's like a duplex essentially. And It was right before the downturn of the economy. So I picked the most, the best time to make it happen.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that was all in Boston. What brought you to Southern Nevada?
So it's either an amazing opportunity or an amazing woman. And so in many cases, it was actually a woman that I met in Boston, and we became, obviously she's my wife, but we met in Boston. She had a great opportunity to come out to Vegas, and we spoke about it. We talked about, what was pros, cons, and so forth and so on. And we decided, Vegas would be the destination. I was at the point of ready to really leave Boston because of the weather. We had the worst winter on record, literally on record that year. But it took me 3 years of going back and forth before I eventually made the move. So I resigned from my job at the time at One United Bank, the largest African-American owned bank in the country. And I was a sales manager there, and made the trek over to Las Vegas, which I thoroughly enjoy living here in Vegas. It's grown on me, and I really appreciate it. I think it was probably one of the better decisions in our lives that we made.
Great. So then you decide you want to get into multifamily.
Yes.
And you go to a seminar. Talk about the motivation to go to that seminar.
Well, I've always felt the learning a little bit more about the real estate. I still owned property. When I moved, I still owned property in Massachusetts. So I was still managing that property and wanted to sort of move up to, getting larger properties and understand the business a little bit more. I had a good background. I got a master's degree in MBA type degree. And so it's a matter of understanding that side of the business on a different level. And so I took a bunch of seminars, and the one specific one that caught my attention was it was a weekend intensive, and it was by Ari Mentor, and it really, really sort of solidified some things that I needed to understand in terms of underwriting, and so all these different things. And of course, I met a unique group there that we became pretty good friends, and eventually partnered.
That's where you and I met. Yeah,
absolutely.
So you were sitting right in the row right behind me, and then, okay, work with the people around you, and
exactly
started working together. And
yeah.
So today you're with Camino Verde Group.
Correct.
And what's your role there?
So I am the VP of Asset Management, partner and VP of Asset Management. And my role is essentially to optimize the assets that are owned and managed by the group. So it's a day-to-day operational oversight of property managers, third-party vendors, and really making sure that the business side of the operation on the ground happens in the most efficient way.
Got it. And you oversee how many different third-party management companies?
Currently about 3, essentially.
3.
Yeah, about 3. Right.
One here, one in Texas.
And there's right now there are 2. Actually, we just shifted from another third party, and right now we're at 2, but we did have 3 earlier in the year. Correct.
Got it. No problem. And so what do you see? What do you look for in a management company?
That's a very good question. I think it's amazing when you interview management companies, everyone has the glossy brochure that they share with you. They tell you basically that they hit every metric that you look for.
You have a good story, right?
Absolutely, right. So there's always a great story with great outcomes. The reality is performance, and you want to see track records, and of course you want to interview people that they actually worked with before, and you look at those intangibles. What you really want in a relationship is a communicational openness, and beyond the numbers, I think there's a high touch that needs to be a part of any of the equation, because you're really dealing with communities. When you take on a a new apartment complex, it's an apartment complex, but it's also a community.
Yeah,
And
it's
unless
kind of
you're
a
able,
living, breathing organization, right?
absolutely, right? It's living, it's breathing, it has feelings, it has emotions. And that side of the business is very important. And you really need to impress me with that sensibility. And so that's a very important part of that. So the high touch, the customer service, and the relatability and communication with the ownership, the sponsorship team, and the management. So that's a very important piece, because at the end of the day, you're communicating every single day with people, you're communicating important things. And that's a really important part outside of the numbers. And of course, you get into the metrics and the KPIs.
Got it. So in our prior discussion, you mentioned you've terminated 2 management companies in the last 6 months. And knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently to either not choose them or to manage them differently?
I think you learn along the way. I think sometimes, a company may impress you going in, and they may actually start out pretty well. But over time, if the enthusiasm isn't the same as it when you first started, there's reason to believe that, an entity checks out, and you can tell, whether it's about the changing of the cycles, the real estate cycles, or if it really relates to someone losing their attention in what they're doing, right? And you kind of hear, the feedback from others that, this person's more vested in doing something different than managing property, or this entity has actually shifted their focus. And so those are things you have to sort of monitor. And if the results aren't there, then you have to ask questions and you have to make decisions.
Yeah. And you need to ask those questions and make those decisions sooner than later.
Yes. Sometimes you're under contract and you have to make sure that you honor your end of the bargain. But at the end of the day, I think you have communication, which can really make that process a little bit easier. And there are times you have to be a little bit more direct. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for your investors. You have to do what's right for your communities. You have to do what's right for, the bottom line of your operation. And so if that means you have to get another management company, that's what you have to do.
Yeah. So that's good. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So talk about, what advice would you give to yourself 4 or 5 years ago? Knowing what you know today, what would you give to someone that's kind of new and starting in the business, or your younger self?
I think it's important to surround yourself, know what your blind spots are. So you have to surround yourself with the right professionals. I think it's important because not everyone's good at everything. And, don't pretend that you do, because this business is an educator in itself, and it will let you know that you don't know everything that you think you do. I think it's important to surround yourself with the right team, because you can't do this business alone. And it's really too big to try to, hoard all the responsibilities. I think you have to be really good about what it is you do well, and allow others to shine and to do the things that they are adept or really qualified to do. And it's really important to build a great team around you with a variety of different types of skills. If you're not good at, day-to-day management, you might be good at, raising capital, you might be good at doing something marketing, and so forth and so on. So it's a matter of understanding the pieces you need to put together to have a successful team.
Great. And how many different properties do you manage, by the way?
In terms of
properties?
Well, I can tell you units, because some of the buildings, they start, the numbers start sort of molding into each other, right? But roughly, I think between 2 entities that I'm involved in, about 1,700 units.
Got it. That's awesome. Okay. And so now, as you think about your relationship, you've formed a relationship with our company, Ascent Multifamily, Talk about why that is and what benefits you see from it.
First of all, the expertise that Ascent brings to the table is unparalleled because of their expertise in multifamily accounting. I've had the opportunity to work with other management companies that are not as proficient. And that's a big deal when you're looking at reporting to investors and you're sharing data about your company and you're having to go back and have adjustments made and things of that nature. But I think Ascent, in working with them, we talk about the things that I value the most: communication, right, and expertise. And they bring that to the fore in handling, the responsibilities that they're contracted to do with our company. And so they're very, very, very well versed. They see all manner of different types of properties, and they are pretty much aware of every situation that you might encounter. So I am so thrilled to be working with Ascent. We have absolutely
primary contacts. Who's your primary contacts that you interact
My
with?
primary contact is Sharon. Sharon Hanners is a genius. She really is. But beyond that, she's also one of those individuals that tells you, what it is. It might not be something that you want to hear at the moment, but she's going to let you know here's a compliance issue that has to be, adhered to, and this is how you do, and this is how you prevent. And she sort of tells you, and in some cases coaches you around that the issues that might come up accounting wise. But I have absolutely all the respect for Ascent, and specifically for Sharon and the folks that you work with.
And you work with them in both Nevada and Texas, right?
Correct. We've had the ability to bring
some different management companies, both
Yes.
working with Ascent. And how has the communication been with the three?
Again, very much the communication has been stellar, exemplary, and we again appreciate the working relationship that we have with Ascent in terms of reporting, in terms of doing the things that really help your business to get the data it needs to run on a day-to-day basis.
Great. When you think about the future, we're in an interesting and challenging time here in the multifamily business, the real estate business in general, and the national economy. What do you see? What do you see going forward? What are the next couple of years look like in your mind? What do you think is going to happen?
It's a really interesting question. I appreciate it. On a macro level, there is still a major need for housing in the country, across the country. I've been in most of the top markets in the country, and then the last 12 to 24 months with San Francisco, Boston, New York, Atlanta, and DC. And one of the interesting things that strikes me is that there's still a really, really big need, and there's a growing homelessness issue in each one of those markets. There's also a downward trend of people purchasing homes. And so there's always going to be a need for new multifamily units or rental units. And I see that as is always going to be a viable place to invest. I also think that it depends on the submarket that you're in. And I think it has to be very interesting that you keep your ears to the ground, in a sense, because each market has its own sort of unique challenges. In this market, obviously there's still a great need for housing stock. A lot of the stock across the country is aging in some of those older markets. And so there's new stock, and it's very difficult to build in some of those cities. But I think there is a opportunity there because the population's exploding, we're still growing, and housing stock is not nearly increasing fast enough. So the opportunity is going to be there. I also think there's going to be challenges with, affordability and, where the trends are going with respect to people choosing to live in certain places. People are moving. The migration patterns are also going to factor into that. People are coming to various cities that they think might be a better place to live. Climate change is going to be an issue for a number of different things. And then, of course, the economic climate is also a telling sign of, funding sources for building and for refinancing and for a number of different things. So I think it's really important to know where you are. And if you're large footprint, in your multi-state entity, like some of the entities that, we're involved in, I think we really have to sit back and look at some strategic ways to stay viable, know when to acquire, know when to sell, those kinds of things. But I think it's a matter of understanding. I think the opportunities there, I think we have to pick our spots in how we engage.
Got it. So, and again, I probably should have asked this early on. Talk about you. I understand you buy a lot of properties. Many of them are 60 years old.
Yeah.
Some of them are in really bad shape. Talk about your process and how you do what you do.
I think, going into, older housing stock, I think it's important to know that, depending on, the square footage and the various different things, I think going in, you have to know exactly what you're looking at. And you get better at that as you obviously do more and more of these types of deals. But there are times, and the times that you ran into a pandemic where everything kind of skyrocketed and the budget that you initially went into the deal with exploded a little bit because you didn't anticipate, backlogs and supply chain challenges. But overall, if you can really stay close to budget, I think going in, you have to be as adept as you can to make sure you understand the cost going in to get the properties online, the add value component, get them as quickly online as possible so that, you can begin to actualize your plan. And so that's really important. That's the one lesson that I think I have learned is that going in, try to get it correct in terms of as close to reality, in terms of what needs to be spent for that construction budget. If you're in the value add business. So I hope you answer that question.
So yeah, so basically what you're saying is before you close on the property, do your homework.
Absolutely.
Together a very realistic budget.
Correct.
That you can execute on and kind of know where you're going.
Absolutely. That's really, really key, because once you close, you have what you have, and the reality facing you, if it's any different from what you thought it was, then you start having some challenges.
Got it.
Yeah.
So let's you've been at this now 3.5, 4 years.
Yep.
Is doing asset management. Basically, after the property's purchased, your job is to execute the business plan.
Right.
So what technologies are you using to help with your job?
Part of the process is obviously we have software that we utilize, and we've talked to a couple other entities that really have introduced us to some technology we're actually trying to pilot right now, and that's how you manage turns and remodels. And so what we've done, to be quite honest and transparent, is that we've been hands-on with those. I think going in low tech, in the sense that you want to eyeball the project, you want to make sure that you're on site doing the kinds of things that you need to do to sort of shepherd the process through. But as you formalize that, I think it's a lot easier to take that formal process and put it into a software, because even if you have the software, you're still going to need to do some of the things that you normally would do. For example, double check on, the timelines and making sure that your vendors are doing what they need to do. But yes, I think we have the process in place to introduce new technology that allows us to be a little bit more fluent and a little bit more, so remote, but giving you the opportunity to see some things in one place. That's kind of where this is going, the process is going. But I think as you as you close and as you really begin the process, it's really important to be present and to be able to look at that stuff in person.
Great, great. So our time is nearly up.
Wow, that's quick.
It goes quick, doesn't it? In what ways are you or your organization trying to give back and serve? Because you've talked about being involved with not-for-profits when you're in Boston.
Correct.
What do you do now?
I think, I've always been, one of the things I've always been involved in, whether it's my local church or volunteer organizations, youth organizations, so forth. Today, for example, we've got a great tenant in U.S. Vets, and we've supported their annual drive and participate in their fundraising efforts to help veterans, get better housing. And so things like that. I've sat on the board for Nevada Jumpstart, which is an organization that promotes financial literacy for young people throughout CCD, the Clark County School District. And we are also doing some personal artistic things that I enjoy. I love creative writing and have been involved in the arts and, doing different types of things for a very long time. We recently have had the opportunity to perform at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. With this group. And my wife is also involved in that, she's also a singer, an entrepreneur. So, but I think helping other nonprofits, one of my good friends here in Vegas is a nonprofit leader, and I help him set up his nonprofit. So even if you're not sitting on a board, I think there's ways that you could participate. I just met yesterday with one of the directors for Jeremiah Project. They are a group that promotes education for young women that are, either having challenges with housing, but one of the ways that they help is to allow those women to go to school and receive an associate's or bachelor's degree. So I work with a number of different entities in the ways that I think, I can assist, whether lending my nonprofit expertise or business expertise around housing. And so we try to find different ways to contribute to a better society. And
you're doing it in a lot of different ways. So that's
absolutely
awesome. Thank you. And then what is a book that you'd recommend for someone to read? Something that you've read in the last couple of years that is one of the top on your recommendation list?
I have there's so many books to read that I have a bunch of them that I tend to read journals and articles more so than I read books, but I have read a bunch of books that have influenced me. For example, The Millionaire Mind, Thomas Stanley, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, if you into those kind of strategic thinking books. Let's have a list here that the Fifth Discipline is a book that I thought was really helpful to me. Again, I gravitated more to understanding strategic thinking and strategic mindset, especially when it came to business. Coming from the banking background and more the corporate background, understanding how to work with different organizations, it warranted me understanding things from different perspectives. I kind of think of it as a paragon, a diamond that has multiple facets, and I think bringing all of those facets together create a wonderful solitaire diamond. And that's kind of the way I think a little bit.
That's great. Hey, well, thank you very much. We want to thank our viewers for watching as well. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, follow us at Camino Verde Group, our channel on YouTube. And everybody, thank you for being involved. We'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you to Ascent Multifamily Accounting for making this podcast possible. Ascent has a team of multifamily accounting experts that provide outsourced bookkeeping for multifamily management companies. To learn more about Ascent Multifamily Accounting, go to multifamilyaccounting.com. We hope you have enjoyed listening to the Multifamily Excellence Podcast. If you want to hear more from multifamily experts like this, you can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. We appreciate your support and can't wait to have you join us again for our next episode. Until then, take care.